Welcome, everybody. Welcome to day one of our fourth biannual Blueprint Leadership Summit. This is a meeting of the top leadership minds and luminaries in the business space, brought to you by Conant Leadership. We're so happy to have you all with us. We are honored today to welcome two amazing guests to kick off the week. Acclaimed leadership practitioner and leadership thinker, John Pepper, who is the legendary former CEO of Procter and Gamble. And he's joined by celebrated journalist and author of the forthcoming biography called Here Forever, which chronicles the astonishing legacy of the late John Smale, another legendary leader of Procter and Gamble and former chairman of General Motors. And we've just dropped a link in the chat. My colleague should be dropping a link shortly to learn more about this amazing book available on Amazon this fall. But before we jump in, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Blueprint, this summit, and about Conant Leadership. Cover some housekeeping items for today's Q&A section, and I'll formally introduce our host, Doug Conant, and our guests, and then we'll be on our way. First, I'm Amy Fetterman, Conant Leadership's editor-in-chief and director of content, and co-author with Doug Conant of the Wall Street Journal bestseller, The Blueprint, 6 Practical Steps to Lift Your Leadership to New Heights. And I'll be helping to moderate the Q&A portion of today's program. If this is your first time engaging with Conant Leadership, welcome. Conant Leadership's mission is championing leadership that works in the 21st century. Our mission is about making meaning, not money. Our founder, Doug Conant, takes no salary, and all profits after covering our operating costs are donated to enlightened organizations whose leadership is moving the world forward. We offer free resources like this summit as part of our larger high-impact suite of leadership resources and training. This summit is a free week-long special event. It's inspired by the leadership wisdom in the Blueprint, but it's not contained by it. Each speaker this week will offer a unique perspective on how to lead people in the post-pandemic era. We'll both draw on timeless wisdom and look forward to the future as the leadership world navigates monumental changes in how, where, and even why people work. An important part of our book, The Blueprint, is the idea that your life story is your leadership story. The more anchored you are in who you are, what you believe, and why you are called to leadership, the more fully you'll be able to show up for your organization and inspire people, no matter what turbulence swirls around you. The luminaries joining us this week all found a way to make an impact on the world in a way that was true to who they are, that was connected to a higher purpose, and that helped them deliver high performance, while also deriving greater joy and fulfillment from their leadership journey. We're just going to watch a short video that tells the Blueprint story before we jump into today's session.
I was 32 years old. My wife and I just had our second son. I was on my way into work one day. The receptionist intercepted me at the door and said, "The senior vice president would like to see you in his office." He invited me to sit down. He said, "Doug, your job has been eliminated. Clean out your office and be out of here by noon." My life changed in a snap. I was devastated, totally caught off guard. My mind was racing. What am I going to do? Just had another baby and a very large mortgage. I'm showing up for work early every day and one of the last people to leave at night, and I'm working on weekends. But I found out maybe I didn't do anything wrong, but I didn't do enough right. An important part of the concept of the Blueprint is that you need to have a strong foundation that will allow you to deal with the winds of change in your life. Because we do powerfully believe the only way out of this is by going in. We're not teaching you some new technique for being more influential with others. We're helping you get more in touch with who you really are and how you want to show up in a way that speaks to you. That's the beauty of the Blueprint process. All the leadership gurus that are out there, they have good points and they have good ideas, but they have not walked 1,000 miles in your shoes. I have.
Great. Now some quick housekeeping about the Q&A portion of today's program. If you think of a question you'd like to ask our panelists at any time during the summit, simply type it into the Q&A box in the bottom center of your Zoom screen and specify which panelist your question is for. When we get to the Q&A portion of the program, I will ask our panelists your submitted questions, and we're going to try to get to as many as possible in the time allotted. If you are using the chat feature, please know that I will not be able to moderate comments or questions there, but my colleague Merrick Hatsikis will be monitoring that chat function just in case you have any technical questions about the Zoom webinar itself. But again, to ask our panelists questions, the Q&A box is the correct place to do that. Next, I'm going to introduce our host today, Conant Leadership founder and CEO, Doug Conant. Doug Conant is the only former Fortune 500 CEO who is a New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestselling author, a top 50 leadership innovator, a top 100 leadership speaker, and a top 100 most influential author in the world. He has served as president of Nabisco Foods, president and CEO of Campbell Soup Company, and chairman of Avon Products. He is also chairman of CECP, that's Chief Executives for Corporate Purpose, and chairman of the Higher Ambition Leadership Alliance. And he proudly serves on the boards of the National Organization on Disability, the Partnership for Public Service, and Hope College. Finally, I will introduce our wonderful guests, John Pepper and Rob Garver. And there is additional information about each of them at the links my colleague Mara will share in the chat box. John Pepper spent a 39-year career at Procter and Gamble from 1986 to 2003, where he served in many distinguished roles, including president, chief executive officer, and chairman. He also served as chairman of the board of the Walt Disney Company from January 2007 to March 2012. In addition, John served with Yale University for 9 years, 2 years as vice president of finance and administration. Today, he is co-chairman of the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, and he has written 2 books, What Really Matters and Russian Tide, and he also writes a blog at pepperspectives.blogspot.com. Rob Garver is a journalist and freelance writer based in Washington, D.C. His work has appeared in the Washington Post, the New York Times, and Voice of America, among many other respected publications. He served as national correspondent for the Fiscal Times and collaborated with Bob Woodward on Woodward's New York Times bestselling book, The Price of Politics. And he is the author of the forthcoming biography of John Smale, which we'll talk about today. That book is called Here Forever. With that, I'll turn it over to our host, Doug Conant.
Well, my goodness, Amy, it sounds like you've covered all the bases. I guess we're done. John and Rob, it's great to have you with us. Thank you for agreeing to do this. I'm going to offer an observation about the Smale book, which will be the focus of our conversation. First of all, I want to say, Amy, that was a brilliant introduction. I just want to manage expectations with our audience. We have a lot of people calling in today, so we may very well not be able to get to your question. We will get to as many questions as we can, but we have an unusually large turnout, and I'm glad we do because this is an important conversation we're about to have. With that as background, I'm going to talk a little bit about John and Rob in a more personal way. John, I have fought, well, first of all, I'll comment on, I studied John Smale as I was a young pup growing up in the corporate world and was fascinated by him, but really didn't know him. But I have had an opportunity to work very intimately with many generations of Procter and Gamble people since then. And when I read the manuscript for this book, I was amazed at the influence he clearly had on them. And I posted something on LinkedIn just last week, I think, or maybe the week before, that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And I'm telling you, John Smale's influence in Procter and Gamble has gone through generations of leaders in a most positive way in terms of his character and his competence. And I look forward to discussing that a bit more. It's also very reflected in John Pepper's book. I remember reading What Really Matters and thinking, this guy's pretty good. He's a high character guy. And now that I've read about Smale, you know, you two were 2 peas in the same pod. The other thing I want to comment about John before we get into the conversation is that Amy mentioned that he went to work for his alma mater, Yale. By the way, that was after he was chairman and CEO of Procter and Gamble. I don't know how many chairman and CEO went back to work for their alma mater as vice president of finance, helping, I think it was Rick Levin then, I'm not sure, but as president. And he was there for all the right reasons, just to help. And it speaks volumes about John's commitment. He was there for a while. They made him stay until he could get it right. And moving on from there, I want to just welcome Rob. Rob and I met once at the Daily Grill here in Washington, D.C., where I'm broadcasting from today, and had a delightful conversation. And he was all into the story of John Smale. And you'll hear a little bit about that as we get into it. But Rob, I want to welcome you to the broadcast as well. Okay, with all that palaver aside, let's get into the conversation. I'm going to start with Rob, and Rob is the author of this new book, Here Forever. Could you give the audience a thumbnail sketch of the arc of John Smale's journey? And also, was there anything that you found particularly surprising as you dug into the details of that career journey?
Sure, thanks, Doug. So Smale spent what he called a working life at P&G. He joined as a young man, rose up through the ranks to become CEO, and he led the company through the 80s. Kind of the defining early moment of his career was the convincing the American Dental Association to endorse Crest toothpaste as a effective cavity fighter. This was a monumental moment in the history of P&G. A huge market-moving event that catapulted Crest to market leadership and kind of set Smale on a path that would eventually lead to much greater things. In his time running the company, he turned it from a operation that had some overseas functions to a truly global company with major operations in dozens of other countries. Doubled the revenue over the course of 10 years and restructured it internally in a way that allowed it to continue extraordinary growth even in the years after he departed. And his second act was to engineer a complete turnaround of General Motors in the early 90s, where he eventually wound up serving as chairman of the board and helped the company avoid what appeared to be looming bankruptcy. So any number of career-defining moments right there. He was led a pretty remarkable life.
What were there anything particularly surprising to you as you were digging into this life? I don't know how much you knew about him going into the project, but anything pop out to you as unique, distinctive? Because he certainly made unique and distinctive contributions everywhere he went. What surprised you? Well,
what surprised me was that once I kind of kept digging into it, I realized that these things I think of as kind of headline achievements, Crest and General Motors, while they were important, weren't really as important as some other factors in terms of my decision that this was really a story that needed to be told. Most of all, I kind of realized that what deserved to be remembered about Smale was the way in which he led. And that is to say, kind of with the idea of stewardship foremost in his mind, a conception of the company as something that was not more than a black box that produced a profit, but kind of the center of meaning for the lives of thousands of its employees, a source of support for thousands more retirees, a pillar of the communities where it operated. And it just struck me that particularly today, with businesses struggling to find workers and seeing the workers they have become, disconnected, backing away from their commitment to the enterprise, I was really struck by his example of a leader who's able to convince people that they were part of something important, something larger than themselves, and something worth committing that working life to.
Oh, that's wonderful. So many people have this perspective of CEOs, it's about them. And it sounds to me like John Smale was about much more than him. In fact, it wasn't about him. It was about serving all of his stakeholders, I imagine, not just the employees. But he seemed to be extraordinarily other-oriented. The other observation I'd make is the popular language these days is companies creating a higher purpose for their enterprise. My impression is that that's what John Smale was doing every day with everyone he met. John, I'm going to turn it over to you because you knew John Smale as well as anyone else. What would you add to Rob's observations?
Well, I built on the last observation that he made and you added to, and that was his fundamental deep conviction that his role and the role of leaders in the past and today in Procter and Gamble or of any institution was to sustain it for the future based on the values that had made it successful, but being ever mindful of the change, the innovation that needed to take place in light of current circumstances in order to achieve the continuation of that success. It was all about the institution, Procter and Gamble first and foremost, then General Motors, but also the city of Cincinnati, and certainly his own family. So this whole concept is that I'm here to serve. The stewardship, you can use that word, whatever word you choose, but that's what it was about. That sense of responsibility and opportunity absolutely drove the man in everything he did. And his commitment to change, to be right for the current world, and to take care of employees, and seeing employees as the nub of it all. Mm-hmm. Without them, we cannot succeed, and we have to recruit, and we need to develop, and we need to nourish the feeling they can make a difference. They count. Yeah. They're responsible. They're accountable, but we want to help them.
Well, and he clearly modeled that. I was really struck by the comments that what people will see when the book is available of former P&G leaders who were so unmistakably and deeply touched by John's leadership. It was, I mean, he clearly modeled that behavior and influenced their behavior. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's absolutely fair to say. In fact, one of the learnings I had as Rob pursued this book was to seeing the depth and the extent of that belief. I mean, here's Chip Bergh. You will see when you have the book. I hope you all get it. Chip Bergh, the president and CEO of Levi Strauss, writing today. I spent the formative years of my 28 years at P&G when Mr. Smale was the CEO. Until I read this book, I didn't realize how much of who I am as a leader today directly flowed from John Smale's DNA as a leader. He always focused on doing the right thing, identifying and growing talent, and making the hard choices that were in the best interest of the company. That last point is so important. So many decisions I saw him make that had some short-term sacrifice involved, but he knew it was right for the long term. As I said in my forward, he didn't think in years, even decades. He was trying to think in generations. And it isn't as if he made this up. This is what he had seen Neil McElroy do, and R.R. Dupree do. So he was very cognizant of the heritage, just as I'm sure there's a heritage in the organizations that those listening or watching this have today. It's honoring that heritage.
Wow. Yeah, we often talk about a leader's responsibility is to honor and leverage the past, deliver in the present, and set the table for a more prosperous future. And it sounds like he was doing all three of those things every day.
He was certainly doing his best.
Yeah.
He titled the collection of his speeches when he retired, "With All That's in Me." Just those words, "with all that's in me." And that's what he did. And that's what he hoped, he expected of the people he'd choose to lead the company.
Well, and those people are now Susan Arnold, chair of Disney, Chip Bergh, CEO of Levi Strauss, and the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah. Paul Pullman had been the chairman of our biggest competitor.
Yeah, oh, that's right. That's right.
Unilever.
Yeah, and then Bob McDonald, who was who's the Secretary of Veterans Affairs for President Obama, and he certainly influenced people who are influencing the world today. John, I was curious, in terms of the qualities, you worked close enough with him. How would you describe him as a leader and a human being? What would be the adjectives you would use?
Well, there'd be several. He was firm. He had extremely high standards of himself and expectations of others. He He really saw the importance of trust. He found it terribly important to identify people he could trust and then let them go. With some level of oversight, of course, but let them go because he knew they would be working to do the right thing. They were competent, they were good character, and they cared that they're getting the job done. I felt that trust myself personally, any number of times. One everybody would look at as very trivial. Happened 50 years ago. I was still maybe 10 years in the company. He was 3 or 4 levels above me. And we were going out to a presentation by the creative director of Y&R. And he drove and I happened to walk. And we both were there. And he said, "Do you want to go home in the car with me?" So I'd never really talked with the man. I said, "Sure, John." I thought that's pretty cool. And he turned to me in the course of the conversation, in the car ride, very quickly. He said, "John, what'd you think of that?" And I didn't quite what to say, but I knew how I felt about it. I said, "I thought it was a lot of hot air," which we just heard. And he looked at me and I guess smiled as he turned away from driving. And he said, "I agree with you." Well, I felt good that he agreed with me, but I felt even better that he had bothered to ask me the question, that he cared. And it wasn't like I'm putting you on the spot. This isn't some quiz. Oh, you could roll the calendar forward another 20 years. I'm now, well, 15, and I'm in charge of P&G Europe.
Mhm.
And he's now the CEO. And I'm trying to get a proposal agreed to expand a new brand in Europe, which if it didn't expand, I was sure we'd get preempted.
Mhm.
And he had turned it down twice. No. And I proved the profit picture each time at least a bit. So I'm back for the third. I'm in Brussels and he's in Cincinnati. And he's got the proposal in front of him. He said, "John, it looks like you still want to do this damn thing." I said, "John, I do. I think it's really important." He said, "Well," and these were words I'll never forget. 1982. "John, we put you in that job. I guess the time has come for me to trust you." And on we went. And talk about confidence building, talk about expectations building. Trust is a magic word. I've
Mhm.
always believed the greatest gift we give another person is our trust. And getting trust from John Smale counted because you knew he didn't give it like pixie dust.
Yeah.
It was earned
Mhm.
because he knew how important it was that we choose people you can trust.
Yeah.
Know not only how to do something, but know what to do. What
Mhm.
to do, not just how to do it, but what to do. So that was a very big quality. Another certainly was his human touch and his sense of humor, which you wouldn't always discover at work, frankly. And this was not a laugh-a-thon.
Uh-huh.
But outside of work, there was a lot of humor. And I
Uh-huh.
always kidded him. He was a great fisherman. And he'd come back and he'd tell me a great fish story. I'd say, "John, do you have a picture?" Now, not that you wouldn't trust John. The one thing about him is integrity was writ large. You know, it's really important, Doug, you agreed, and everybody would, having trust in not just one-to-one. It's a cultural matter. Do you trust people will do their best? Or do you trust them they'll tell you the real deal, not a lot about a BS? Are they straight with
Yeah.
you? Will they say the same thing to the other person they just said to you?
Mhm.
One thing you could count on with John, absolutely straight.
Mm.
And his trust went all over. And he'd ask for trust sometimes.
Mhm.
There was a young man who wanted to become the Crest brand manager. You mentioned Crest. John wanted him to be on Puffs. Well,
Mhm.
Bob Whalen didn't want to be on Puffs. He wanted to be on Crest. And John said, and he was resigning because he wasn't on Crest. John came to him and said, "I want you to trust me. I want you to trust me, Bob. We will do the right thing for your career." And he went on to Puff and he made Puffs a bit successful, a bit more successful, and eventually ended up on Crest.
Mhm.
It's important to ask for trust.
Yeah.
The biggest evidence of trust I saw anybody ask of John Smale was in the midst of one of our greatest, and I'll stop with this, technical challenges, our paper-making technology that led to Bounty and Charmin. And it was failing out the kazoo. We were belts were breaking, 10 million here, 10 million more. And the big meeting came where John had another proposal and he said to the group, I'm sorry, I cannot continue. This isn't working. To which the process development engineer leaned across the table and said, John, I want you to trust us. We can make this work. Don't give up now. He signed another check and on it went. I always think asking trust is the greatest demand we can make of another person. You don't make it lightly, but make it of the right person with the right relationship. And you'll often find you've done the right thing.
Oh, that's eloquently said. And all of this language is as relevant today as it was back then. I'm going to turn to Rob in a second, but I would also observe that I think all of us in our own careers, Rob, you and John and I, we remember those small moments that had a profound impact on us that might seem trivial to anyone else, but where somebody said just the right thing in just the right way at just the right time. And we carry it with us today. And I had the feeling that when John Pepper was talking about the story in the car on the way back from the advertising agency, you and I have had those moments too, Rob, where it's a sentence, but we'll never forget it. And it influences how we choose to walk in the world today. So thank you for sharing all that, John. We're going to turn it over to Rob now. And Rob, you might want to amplify a little on that, but also amplify on John's observations. But then tell me, why would you write this book now? John Smale passed away a while ago. Is his leadership story of the 20th century still relevant and helpful to leaders in the 21st century? If so, why? And for the record, all of us sitting on this call strongly and powerfully believe it is. So I'm not setting you up for anything. We have your back, Rob, but you've got to carry the ball now, so be good.
That's good to know, Doug. Thanks. So I will just build on what John was saying very briefly before moving on. That the number of people who reached out to me during the process of this book with stories about those moments was overwhelming. I couldn't possibly put them all into the text. But as you said, Smale kind of had this gift of saying something meaningful to someone who was multiple levels below him that inspired them or kind of kept them on task. One thing he liked to do was to write short handwritten notes to people, frequently people who had no contact with him before, many levels down. But if they had done something particularly helpful to the company or had shared something that was particularly insightful, he would write them a note, handwritten note, and have it sent to them. And people have saved these for decades. They found it so meaningful that that's whether he was the president or the CEO, this kind of personal touch was just extraordinarily meaningful to a lot of these people. Many of them, kind of at the early stages of their careers. But getting to your broader question, why now? The subtitle of the book uses the word timeless, and I really do believe a lot of the examples he set here are timeless. There's, inspiring people doesn't really come with an expiration date. If you're able to make people believe that they're part of something important, something larger than themselves, I think that's an example that serves across decades. And he was particularly good at that, making people believe that they were not just a disposable piece of a machine, but that their contribution was essential. to the greater success of this larger enterprise. And it was an enterprise that Smale very consciously characterized to people as a force for good in the world. Producing products that people want and that makes their lives better. That's good, but that's only one element of it. He really saw this, the institution of Procter and Gamble, as something that kind of moved through the world, improving the world as it went. And that was by giving opportunity to gifted people to kind of become successful, to provide for their families, giving them the opportunity to give back to their communities, providing a stable source of income for thousands and thousands of retirees. He believed his company was a force for good, and he was able to convince people of that. And I think that's an example of leadership that I think is relevant at all times.
Yeah, well, he certainly walked the talk. That's not my definition of leadership, but he did. And that's helpful. You know, I would observe also that in today's world, there's a dearth of John Smales. So I feel there couldn't be a better time for the John Smale message when we talk about building trust, higher purpose, force for good. Hey, that's right down the center of the highway of what we need more of today. And here we have a real life lesson that impacted thousands and thousands of stakeholders in Procter and Gamble and millions of people around the world. Mm-hmm. So it's a great story that is, in my opinion, maybe more relevant now and maybe not more relevant, but more needed now than ever before. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to turn to John Pepper for the last question, and then we should have primed the audience to tell us all the things we got wrong. But John, you heard Rob riff a little on his thoughts. You're incredibly well anchored on the point of view of what's essential in terms of leading. Could you amplify on Rob's observations, and then we'll turn it over to Amy to lead us through the Q&A.
A couple of things I'd build on, Doug. One is the relevance for today. I thought a lot about that, and really what has been a 10-year desire on my part to see this book written. As every year has gone by, so he died in 2011, the question is still there, is it still relevant? And I think one of the things that makes it so relevant is the decline in trust in institutions of all kinds. It's a sad thing, it's an alarming thing, frankly, but the reality is we all seek something we can have trust in, we can believe in, we can count on, and make a difference in. It starts with our family, first, second, and third priority, but we look for something outside of the family. And if we can find it in the institution for which we work, whatever that is, a university, a business, we found a good thing. And that's what so many of us, and you'll see in the endorsements to the book and the stories, people found in Procter and Gamble, in which I believe firmly is being continued today. I'd want to emphasize in thinking about John, how fiercely focused he was on being a force for growth and a force for good. They both came together. He believed it deeply, he said it many times, it's in the book. An organization like ours has to grow. It has to grow. And it can only grow through innovation. And that innovation has many dimensions. It has to start by innovating in actually what we produce for consumers or our customers. We've got to get better in that. As he said often, fundamentally, we're an R&D company. Fundamentally, we're an R&D company. He'd say to the R&D people, if we're going to be successful 50 years from now, it'll be because we're able to develop new technologies and new products from them better than anyone else, breaking new ground. So the focus on change to ensure that continued growth was essential. It focused on R&D, but everybody speaks innovation these days. We all call for more innovation. The thing John did beyond that was he operationalized it. He operationalized this focus on product change. How? He put the first R&D director on the board of directors. He created a new committee of the board devoted to innovation. He changed the structure of brand management to get to category management. He changed the profit responsibility, made that part of being a brand. It wasn't before. Not to go through more, but he operationalized it and he was present. He was present to be sure it went through. In changing our customer relationships, we moved to customer business development teams with Walmart, the first one in the mid-'80s. There was a lot of resistance to that, a lot of resistance. People didn't want to give up their fiefdom. And he walked into a meeting finally and he said, folks, I just want you to know we are going to do this. We are going to do this. So he'd make the tough move to do that. But everything Rob said about being a force for good, the role in the community, that's our responsibility. This isn't like an add-on. It's part of who we are and who we need to be.
Thank you. I think we've given our audience a lot to chew on right now. Before I turn it over to you, Amy, at Conant Leadership, we often talk about, look, it's a challenging world, right? Warren Bennis coined the phrase VUCA world: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And that was in 1987, he said that. Today, it would be like a VUCA world on steroids. And if you want to grow and if you want to survive in this world, you need to grow. It's a grow or die world. It's very Darwinian, right? You either grow or you don't. There's no middle ground here. And I think John Smale recognized that so clearly, that creating this growth imperative, connecting it to a force for good mentality. Wow, what a powerful combination. And that he was able to operationalize it. You know, in the video we showed on the blueprint, we have a lot of people that talk about leadership, but very few have done it. And he did it. He talked about it, he thought about it, and then he brought it to life in a very tangible way in a huge company that was not easy to, I mean, you talk about turning a battleship around in a bathtub. And he did that. So just an amazing fellow. And I'm going to turn it, we could talk all day, but I'm going to turn it over to Amy now because I'm 4 minutes overtime. I'm sorry, Amy, but we're close. We're close enough.
It's not you, Doug. It's been us going on.
Well, it's the three of us stumbling over each other.
Hey, before you get to Amy, let me just add one 30-second thing, maybe not even that.
Okay.
It's Jim Collins. You had Jim Collins up here for something.
Yeah.
Into this, and he wrote a book called Built to Last, as you know. And he said something in there that I think defines what we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The Chinese yin-yang signal. On one side was preserve the core, and the other was stimulate progress, which I changed in the book I wrote, which you referred to kindly, was preserve the core and be prepared to change everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And that was John Smale's mindset.
Wow.
Change everything else that needed to be to grow in line with the values.
Wow.
Bingo.
Okay. It's that easy. I don't know why it's so hard for people.
I
Oh my
know,
gosh.
it sounds so easy to talk this way.
All right, Amy, lead us into the next part of the program, please.
Okay, and thank you all for your insights so far. This has been a great conversation. We're going to start. We have a question here from Colin. This is for both panelists. Are we in a different era now based on disintermediation of tech/digital? What lessons from Smale apply to connecting/motivating the current generation of leaders starting their careers? And Rob, we'll start with you, and then I'll invite John to build on your answer.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, it's certainly a challenge that Smale would not have faced. There was there's a story in the book about how P&G passed down its leadership kind of ethos over the years. And when Smale began in the 50s and then in the 60s, he showed up every day at lunch and sat down at a long table where the current CEO and chairman and the retired chairman and the retired chairman before that one all sat down and just discussed issues of importance to the company every day in front of a cohort of young managers. And that's how they passed things on. That sort of became unavailable even in the years when Smale was running the company. It just wasn't practical to think that you could pass on knowledge on a one-to-one basis that way via just personal interactions. The company had gotten too big. So one thing they did, and John Pepper can talk about this because he was intimately involved in it, was creating this statement of purpose, values, and principles that kind of codified what it meant to be at P&G. It codified what the company expected of its employees. It codified what employees could expect of the company, and it codified what the company intended to be doing with regard to its customers, its suppliers. So I think if I'm getting to the heart of the question, it's a different world, but there are ways to reach out and convince people or explain to people what you mean, what you expect, and how to be part of the organization going forward. John, I don't know if you've got any adds to that.
Well, going back to the question, as best as I can remember, the thing in employees coming in today, the one thing that still is the same is they have to feel they're a part of something that's important, that done well makes a difference in the world. And above all, they need to feel they matter. They need to feel they count, that they're being looked to and given the wherewithal and the scope and the responsibility to do their thing. Everybody on the call knows that nothing frustrates a young person more than too much bureaucracy that has to be fought, or feeling there's too many people involved, I can't make a difference. In terms of how to deal with digitalization, all these things that are new, John's attitude would have been the same as with other change going on. He would have made sure we were getting people in and having connections that would help learn. P&G for many years has traded employees with Google. We've had Google people come in on an internship for us, and we've had employees go to Google, or it might be Facebook. We've got to recognize what we don't know and recruit for it. And that's in some cases led P&G to move away from a promote from within policy. Promote from within is still core, but we brought people in at higher levels of management that we never would have done in the 1980s and 1970s. And why? Because we needed the capability that these men and women had acquired. So you have to change in order to fulfill the mission of growth, of providing the best service, best to consumers, to customers. You have to be alert to it, especially today, because the change is blitzkrieg, as the question implies.
If I could just build on it, and I haven't worked at Procter and Gamble, but I've known a lot of people who have. I think today, people really need to connect to the higher purpose of the organization, because all the strategies and tactics are up for grabs. Things are changing so fast as part of this new disintermediation, all this digital transformation. What we're finding is that associates hunger to have a deep and visceral understanding of what the higher purpose is for their company and what the values are, so that they can trust the purpose and the values, knowing that their world is going to be crazy day to day because of the nature of the world. So I think we're talking about the what of John Smale is all about purpose, force for good, and the many qualities that John and Rob talked about. The how is changing, but the what is, I would argue, more essential now than ever before. This whole conversation for all of the companies, even in the tech space, about what's our purpose, what are our values. This is a place, if you want to learn about purpose and values and really want to learn how it works, go to Procter and Gamble, go to J&J. There are only a handful of companies that have really evolved this to a real craft. with what I would call a mastery model. And there's a lot to learn from that mastery model. Amy, let's go to the next question.
Thank you, Doug. We have a question from Aaron. Aaron says, thank you for this. I'm wondering about how do we as leaders restore or repair the trusting relationships that we inherit? Let's start with John for this, and then we can go to Rob.
By forming personal relationships with people you're in contact with. They can need to know you, that you're real, that you care about them. I don't mean just in a business sense. We don't spend enough time with each other. And it doesn't take a lot of time. Just knowing what are their aspirations? What are their challenges? How can we be of help to them? I liked what one manager always said to his people. This was the first head of the Walmart team. To a new person coming in, he'd say, I want you to tell me as you go along the 3 things you'd like me to do differently in order to help you do your job better. One of the things I was only going to stay with P&G for a year. I was in law school. I took a 1-year deferral. There are a lot of reasons why I stayed. Competitiveness of it. I felt I could try things and half worked and half didn't. And one of the things about having people feel trusted is to let them do what they want to do, sometimes even when you're not sure it will work. Don't let it be something that'll bring the company down, but give them a chance to show if their idea will work. This is what trust does. People trusted me to do all kinds of things. And what we can do for people today is trust them to try things, to do things. But above all, let them know they matter. Everybody wants to think they believe they count. And it isn't just words. What makes you feel you count? Well, sometimes it could be something as simple as, I need you to do this. Not with the feeling if you don't do it, you're out the door, but a feeling I just believe in you enough and the task is big enough that I really look to you to make it happen. Mm. People did that for me again and again, and sometimes I was amazed they did. You really think, I didn't say that to them. I didn't say, you really think I can do that? You're really going to put me in that job? Nothing makes a person feel better than being asked to do something they weren't even totally sure they could do themselves, not just in the business. John Smale, again, way back when, asked me to help him on the art museum. They couldn't get enough people in the door anymore. He said, John, would you help me come up with a new idea to get more people in the door at the art museum? I said, I'd love to. So what did we do? We came up with a new idea that the head of the art museum thought was crazy. We said, let's bring in a new exhibit from London. It was knights in armor. And the head of the museum said, what's knights in armor have to do with the Museum of Art? I said, well, I think it could fit, but what I do really believe is it'll build the audience. And it did. Let people try things, know they matter. I'd stop there.
Wonderful. Rob, do you have anything to add?
Just from looking at Smale's career, one of the things that he did consistently was reach out to younger people in the organization and have conversations with them. This happened multiple times. I have many examples of people who he was randomly seated near them at an event and would strike up a conversation, something that they weren't likely to do, knowing who he was and what his position was. And he would ask probing questions, ask them what they were doing, and then he would follow up. There are multiple people who were many layers down below him in the hierarchy, who he would call once a year and just have them come and have lunch with him and talk and tell him about the business. And I think, in a company of thousands, he could only do this with a certain number of people, but that's a seed that's planted. These people go back to their colleagues and can say, you know what, the CEO was asking about our project. And, you do that a few dozen times and that spreads out and it creates this sense that it's not a faceless bureaucracy, there's somebody up there who has got down in the weeds and looked at what I'm doing. And I think that helps build the kind of trust that there's somebody kind of looking out for you, looking after you. I think that would work in any organization.
You know, Rob, I've been on sales training after 12 months with the company. And one of the life-changing things I learned was out there, one of the sales representatives who'd been with the company about 15 years told me that the company had flown his daughter down to Texas for treatment on an ambulance plane. And I just didn't think a company would do that. And story after story like this, you mentioned some, Janet Reed, who's in this book, an African-American woman. John developed the very kind of relationship you've described, Rob, and he did it with countless others. And that's one of the things I learned from the book. I knew he had this touch. I felt it personally. I saw it with some, but it was so much deeper and broader. It was part of his life.
Well, I'm just going to build on this conversation at Conant Leadership. And we talk a lot about leading by listening. You've got to be incredibly well anchored in who you are and how you want to show up, your purpose, your values. But then, there's nothing like leading by listening and asking for other people's point of view and finding a way to connect to it in a way that advances the agenda, but also honors the person. And it sounds like that's what John Smale was doing every day. Amy, let's go to the next question.
Great. Thank you all for those answers. We have a question from Mary. First, she says, this has been just wonderful. Thank you, Mary. How might Smale have responded to the tired, weary workforce coming out of the pandemic? Any translational thoughts for today's workforce, particularly those who were on the front lines? Let's start with John and then go to Rob.
I'd start, I think, by reminding people of the good that's being done by the company and by the individuals in the company. I had down moments. I felt, this is a slog. And what I did in those moments was I tried to reunite with why we're doing this. Why are we doing this? I'd go out and I'd talk to some consumers. I talked to fellow employees in a plant who had worked morning, noon, and night to get it out during the supply crisis. That would reinvigorate me. But sometimes we don't do enough to share with other employees the good that's being done, the challenges that are being overcome. Sometimes we take it for granted. I always felt it was very important as people working in finance or product supply behind the desk to actually bring to life through film, through testimony, what's the impact of all this on consumers? And what is the difference individuals are making? I celebrate something like our feminine care team on Always intervening with the government in Brazil to get tampons free for poor households. Well, to share that information around the whole company, this is what's happened by P&G people looking what can be done to improve lives. Everybody can be lifted by that. So I'd share the good news. I'd share what's happening, not gilding the lily, not making anything up, but I'd share good news and good news that people are doing. We've got to celebrate success. At the same time, we've got to recognize and be responsive to the challenge people are facing. Are we giving them enough time to take care of the children? It's the most sensitive environment I think human resource officers have been in my lifetime, is what the challenge they face coming back to work, people stretched. I think above all, we've got to show we're concerned about it and we're taking every practical action we can to help.
Yeah, if I can add anything to that, it would be that I think Smale's approach here, particularly with the frontline people, would have been to show up, to not just send out memos, but to show up. He famously loved touring P&G's production facilities, miles away from Cincinnati. He had no expertise in operating the machines or anything like that, but he wasn't there for that. He was there in large part to be seen and to communicate with the people on the ground. And I can only assume that in this, especially during the pandemic, being there would have been one of his kind of key goals, is to kind of show the flag and say, what we're doing here, it's difficult, but it's worth it. People need the products that you are creating here, and I know it's hard, but it's worth it. And it's there's meaning to what you're doing beyond a paycheck, and beyond the company's bottom line.
I would, go ahead, John.
No, I just say, just triple underscore that, being present,
Yeah.
being in the plants, being in the customer business teams, going out to the finance department in a different facility, being present.
Yeah, showing up is, Woody Allen had that right. It's, 95% of life is just showing up. And he was modeling a certain behavior and a commitment that transcended just the bottom line, and a commitment to people. We've observed at Conant Leadership that all of our organizations have evolved to be amazing critical thinking machines. We can find what's wrong faster than you can snap your fingers. And even in the most broken organizations I've been in, with KKR, and when I first went into Campbell Soup Company, I'm telling you, 8 out of 10 things were being done right. But nobody was talking about those 8 out of 10 things. And so one thing as a leader in response to this question is, look for what's going right. You will be invigorated by that. I can guarantee it. What people are doing is what people have done through the last 3 years is amazing. I work with a number of doctors at NYU Langone Medical Center in New York City, going through the COVID crisis, exhausted, but they can't imagine what it would have been like had they not been there, had the doctors in New York City not been available to those patients and those families. And so they worked extra hard to remember that a lot of good came out of that in the face of just an awful crisis that no one anticipated. When I worked with Denise Morrison, who succeeded me at Campbell Soup Company, she had a simple little thing that I thought was so helpful. I would commend it to anybody on the call. If you were talking to her about your business, you knew these 3 questions were going to come up. Just fasten your seatbelt, they're coming. She would always start though with, what's working? What's going well? Let's bask in the glow of that for a minute. But you always knew the next question is, well, what's not going so well? What do we need to work on? But she always started celebrating all the positive things that were connected to whatever the subject was. And she really paid attention to that. But it was always quite clear that, yeah, we're going to celebrate that, but we have a job to do here. We've got to deal with what's wrong. And then what's needed? What's next? So I commend this to everybody who's dealing with these challenging times now. You're working with your teams. What's working? Let's enjoy it. Let's celebrate that. What's working for the team? What's working for you? What's not? And what's needed? And then one last story for me. I was once, you saw the video, I lost my job and felt very blindsided. They sent me to an executive outplacement counselor who every time he answered this is a long time ago, so there was no call answering. You couldn't tell who was calling. There was no cell phone, landline. And every time he answered the phone this way. He said, "Hello, this is Neil McKenna. How can I help?" He didn't know if you were the plumber or somebody, a bill collector. He didn't care. He was just there to help. If I was to suggest one thing to our audience, it's get well anchored and be there to help. Ask what's working, be alert to what's not, because we got to deal with that. And then collaboratively work with the people that work with you to build a better world in your little corner of that world. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it, but I'm going to turn it over to Rob and John to make a comment. And I think do we have time for one more question, Amy? Or did I use
don't
up
think
all the
so. I
time?
think we have to turn it over to our wonderful panelists for some closing thoughts.
Okay. Well, we've done our best to make you guys look good. So now you got to have a strong finish. I don't care. We're going to put Rob first, and then we're going to have the strong finish from John Pepper. So Rob, you better be good.
It's always a relief not to follow John Pepper, believe me. Listen, I just want to thank you, Doug and Amy, for this fantastic conversation, and for everybody who is tuned in here. As I said earlier, I do believe that there are lessons in this book that are timeless, that can be applied today every bit as much as they were applied in the 1980s. And just as a kind of an added pitch, there are stories in here that have not been told before, about some really kind of dramatic events at two really iconic American companies, Procter and Gamble and General Motors. So beyond the fact that it's, I think, very illustrative of what a great leader looks like, it's also a good story. There's just a lot of good stuff in there about these two companies that folks probably haven't heard before. So on that, I'll hand it off to you, John.
All right. Thank you, Robin. Thank you very much, Doug and Amy, and all of you who set this up, and of course, all of you who are listening, who are watching. I won't say a lot more. I've tried to convey what I believe. I've been blessed in my life, above all with my wife and my family, but I was blessed to find Procter and Gamble, and then from that to Walt Disney Company. I've had the privilege of working with some amazing leaders at Walt Disney, Bob Iger, Steve Jobs, who was on the board, and many others at Procter and Gamble. But as I say in my foreword to the book, of all of them, so many I admire and learn from, John Smale stands the tallest for reasons that we've talked about. Above all, certainly what he did, but much more than that, by how he led, how he made people feel. He led in a way that articulates the principles we need today, developing an organization that has a real sense of purpose that can be shared and that other people will identify with, values that make that come alive, and then actions, above all actions, that make it real. This focus he had, we've talked a lot about perpetuating, sustaining excellence with a focus needing on people and innovation. That's timeless. That won't go away. It's going on now. So I hope many of you will read the book. I obviously hope that you'll find value in it, as I did in John's life and what he did and what he represented. I think with that, I'll simply close by saying anyone has questions. I don't know if this is possible that we didn't get to, Doug, that you'd like to have Rob or me answer, send them our way. Be happy to write an email or respond to them in any way that I could. I know we haven't had enough time to get into what may be all the questions, or questions that may come from people viewing this a bit later, which I understand will be the case. But this book has been a dream of mine, not as a book necessarily, but in perpetuating the values of this man that could benefit other people. But I must say I am so pleased and in some ways amazed at the job Rob has done on this book. As somebody who didn't know P&G, didn't know John Smale at all, has been able to capture the spirit of the man, the humanity of the man, and the essence of what made him good has been really quite remarkable. And I thank you before, and I will thank you again, Rob. You've done a beautiful job.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. And Rob, don't let that go to your head.
I'll try.
You can still do better.
Yes, yes, we can all do better. That's life, Doug. But as you said before, let's take a moment to at least maybe even a minute to celebrate the good.
Okay, just a minute. Just a minute, though.
We've never spent much time at that. We don't spend a second celebrating the year we've just completed successfully before we're on to, oh my God, what are we going to do this coming year?
Oh, you got me. You foisted on my own petard. Okay, Amy, we're going to turn it over to you for the big close. And thank you, John and Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to our extraordinary panelists, John Pepper and Rob Garver, for sharing your time and leadership insights with us today. I know I'll be carrying John's message of let people try things with me for a long time. Thanks to our host, Doug Conant, and thank you to all our attendees. Thank you for your commitment to the craft of leadership. I want to tell you about some exciting ways to engage with Conant Leadership's suite of training and content, but first, make sure to pre-order your copy of the amazing forthcoming book about John Smale, Here Forever, at the link in the chat box. It's johnsmalehereforever.com. Don't miss that book. It's going to have a lot of great stories and insights. Next, join us for tomorrow's Blueprint Leadership Summit session at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. The CEO of Abercrombie & Fitch, Fran Horowitz, will be joining us, and she and Doug, they're going to be discussing strategies for lifting workplace culture, helping employees thrive, and engaging a next generation workforce in the post-pandemic era, all very relevant to today's leadership conversation. Next, our signature leadership development program at Conant Leadership is the Blueprint Boot Camp. It is a 2-day virtual leadership intensive offering elite level, highly interactive training with Doug directly and a community of your leadership peers, and that's followed by personal mentorship with Doug. We have one remaining program this year in November. If you'd like to explore this premium tier of transformational leadership development, you can apply today at conantleadership.com/bootcamp, or reach out to us directly. You can reach out to Conant Leadership Chief of Staff, Mara Katsikis, at mara@conantleadership.com. We are offering a special limited time coupon code only for Summit attendees. You can use the code SUMMIT500 at checkout to get $500 off the registration price of our bootcamp. There is limited space, so act quickly and use that discount code to reserve your spot. Next, you can always engage with our suite of free leadership resources at conantleadership.com or find us at Doug Conant on Twitter and LinkedIn. Keep an eye on our social media. We have timely leadership content and updates about all of our upcoming virtual events, summits, and learning opportunities, including a bonus session that's part of this summit with Bill George in November later this year. Stay tuned. And you can explore our entire library of past summit sessions with leadership luminaries like Brene Brown, Indra Nui, Dan Pink, Hubert Jolie, Susan Cain, and many more at conantleadership.com/video. If we didn't get to your question today, or you have any follow-up inquiries, please reach out to Mara at conantleadership.com. We're here to help. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you tomorrow for our session with Fran Horowitz.